Welcome, everybody. Episode 13 of the Critical Levitical podcast.
That was a very
Should go to like 12,
Mellow?
12B.
Okay.
The Critical Levitical podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 13.
Yeah,
That was
can you put a
weirder.
slight vocal
Take
fry in there so we can sound like
Okay.
podcasters?
You want to know my beef with vocal fry? You didn't
Hit
know
us.
this was coming. Okay, so I love to go see movies. I love, for our British listeners, all 0.2 of you, the cinema or the pictures. This guy at AMC, at AMC, I don't know if you know, they do like 4 different intros for their movies.
Yes.
But they have this new guy, like probably the last couple years
They
or
got
so.
rid of Maria Menounos?
No, she still does the Nuvi stuff.
Oh, okay.
But it's
So
like
lost.
the little I don't know, animated intros
For
to
Preston, movie theaters are expensive nap times.
Oh, okay.
Man, The Dark Knight. No, which one was it that we went to? The newest Batman movie.
The Batman.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Hardest I've
Battinson.
slept in a long time.
Dude, that movie is amazing. Whatever.
it was
Anyway.
pretty good. The flipped over car and that was
Preston
good.
doesn't
I'm-
like
I am-
good
I wake up
things.
in
This is-
between scenes and
Yeah, anyway.
So anyway, tell us about vocal
Yeah.
fries.
His voice has such a tremendous vocal fry, and it's intentional because it's supposed to be like some epic intro voice or whatever. I can't stand it. I hate it. So
I
vocal
can't do
fry,
vocal
man,
fries.
I don't like it. And I know it's natural if people talk quietly, but some people do it intentionally, especially like people online or you're trying to be an
People talk
influencer.
quietly.
Yeah, like if you speak slow, then you'll have a natural vocal fry.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. Thank you, Cameron.
You're doing
Like, what do you
the-
mean by
you're
vocal
doing the
fry? What do you
ASMR
think of
thing.
vocal
Like a little
fries?
like the little crackling, the little
No, that's not a vocal
Yeah,
fry.
it is.
Yeah. That's what I was referring to when we had this whole conversation the
No,
other day.
no.
Yeah.
I'm referring to like the drawn out ending syllable.
Huh. No,
Oh,
it's like
yeah. Well, I
a vocal
put 'em
register
together.
characterized by a low, creaky, or popping sound produced by slow, irregular vibrations. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you guys are saying the same thing.
I agree. It mostly comes out at the end of
You're
words or phrases.
emphasizing different
For sure.
Yeah.
aspects of it.
Yeah.
It's right. And it's like a variation, a subdomain of
Right.
the vocal fries, like Valley Girl, right? Which
Okay,
is
sure,
the worst
sure.
one.
Yes,
like,
yes,
oh
yes.
my,
For sure.
like that kind of stuff.
For sure.
Like when people
I'm following.
still talk like that in 2025.
Okay, so
Do talk
Cameron
to
and I
me.
unite to start the episode on our hatred for some vocal fry.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Yeah.
I'll take it.
But like,
what
yeah, gravelly doesn't bother me as much. Like,
Fair.
that's the like,
It's very-
like this.
I get that. Totally
at the end
fair.
of the.
Here's what irritates me the most about this conversation is that predominantly it's an affectation that you see women display.
Mm.
And when you point out that you don't like it, you are sexist.
Mm.
And like that is the
yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Okay.
I've heard
I
that.
guess there is the
for
gravelly
yeah.
poppiness in there.
Yeah.
Never
It's a
really
thing.
connected that. Yeah.
Anyway, so next time you go to AMC, you're welcome because that's all you'll hear. At least that's all I hear. All
or
right.
any one of the true crime podcasts Caitlin listens to.
Oh, fair
Yes.
enough. Oh, that too. Yes. Oh man. All right. Anyway.
Hey, if you're enjoying the Critical Levitical podcast, do us a favor, drop a like, subscribe, leave a good review, all that good stuff. If you know someone who has questions about what we're talking about today, share it with them. Every little bit helps us out, so we would greatly appreciate it.
If you listen to our last episode last week, first of all, thank you for listening to our last episode. This episode is
very
related.
sincere.
We talked about like, are Christians just bad at loving people or being kind sometimes? Because the reality is they are. Today, I'm going to show you a quote because this is that in display. A church not really being kind and perhaps non-church people being a little bit more kind. I'll read this for you. So I think this is a tweet or a thread post. I think a thread post.
It says thread.
Right, but
It's a
I don't
thread
know if-
on Twitter. X.
Okay, it is on X. Okay,
X,
cool.
formerly Twitter.
Got it. So this is from Zach W. Lambert. He says, Philip Yancey's friend, who's a recovering alcoholic, once told him, when I'm late to church, people turn around and stare at me with frowns of disapproval. I get a clear message that I'm not as responsible as they are. When I'm late to AA, the meeting comes to a halt. Everyone jumps up to hug and welcome me. They realized that my lateness may be a sign that I almost didn't make it. When I show up, it proves my desperate need for them. One out over my desperate need for alcohol. So there's a lot to break down here. First, if you know anything about this guy, I don't subscribe to everything he says on X and or formerly Twitter. So just like chew out the meat, spit out the bones, please, because there's a lot here that's not great on his profile. But this is a really interesting quote because I think it sheds light into something that we started, the conversation we started last week, which is Christians have a tendency to be a lot less welcoming than they should. That's what I should say. Now, there's a lot more to this. I don't want to start this conversation, though. I think, Cameron, you submitted this one, if I understand correctly. And
It says, the title of the JPEG right here is
there it is.
Cameron-church-people-suck.
Okay,
So
perfect. Cameron, why do church-people-suck?
so many reasons.
I mean, yeah, fair. We are some of the reasons.
It's like for people who are saved by grace, we're the least graceful people.
Hang on.
There's the
planet.
t-shirt.
Yeah, I don't know. There's so many things. So like the last episode we talked about it was the church sign that said what did it say? Is kind atheists are closer to Jesus than mean Christians. Like, and that's obviously it's like doctrinally not true, but it's also so true. And this is like another example of that, of just like, man, like some people outside the church, which they get it. And I grew up like super in the kind of the hyper conservative ideology that like, well, nobody can be good unless they're a Christian. Like everybody who's not a Christian is just a horrible, filthy person, which we're not going to debate Romans 3:10 and all that. That's not, you know what I mean when I say that. Like none are good, none are good. Yeah, whatever. But I grew up with that ideology, and it really took a long time to shift to understand like, oh no, there's a lot of moral people out there who are not believers. There's a lot of amoral people who claim to be believers, and that like they're not mutually exclusive. And so that like recognizing that I think is a good starting point for this kind of conversation, which really should compel us to ask, okay, what kind of person am I?
Yeah.
When
introspective.
Right. Yep. When I encounter people not like me, when people walk into my church, when people don't fit what I feel like is like the XYZ way that people should live or whatever. That's I think the healthy way to view it. Whether we do that or not, I think evidently not. Because I was talking about this with a friend the other day. Like the fact that people go through this life, because we were talking about like somebody that we know is just not very loving, and they seem to not necessarily be aware that they're not very loving, and that's strange to me because I spend probably too much time, and really from an unhealthy perspective, probably anxiety, like need to like be a people pleaser or whatever, thinking about how other people perceive me. I know like I've kind of got like a cranky like persona or whatever, and some like
for those
to some
who
extent, but
for those who really know you, they know that's not true though.
Right. Yeah. And like that's the thing. Like so I think about, okay, how am I actually going to be perceived in this? Like, am I going to be perceived as a loving person? And maybe that's not from the right angle, but I think the result is still that I try to care about people genuinely. But there are people who walk through this world. There are people who walk through our church hallways that thought has never entered their mind.
Yeah.
Which is
that's tough.
Insane to me. And some of the least loving people I know have not missed a single Sunday of church in like 83 years.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Yeah.
And I have a quote here I'll share, but I want to hear your takes on that first.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Preston, because I've got some stuff I want to say.
Well, first of all, I think Zach may have been making a different point than you guys are considering.
Highly possible.
Oh, for sure.
Highly possible. Anyway.
I was being sarcastic, kind of.
Oh,
I
no.
was going to make
if you see the rest of this guy's, as soon as I saw him, I'm like, what did you share from him? Because like, he's like literally wrote a book about why the Bible shouldn't really be trusted and all this stuff. So,
oh gosh, no, I wasn't making no attempt to defend this guy. Yeah. No, I was going to make a joke about how church people a lot of times tend to be introverted. And so the difference is that nobody at church wants you to jump up and hug them. That's why he's saying this.
Yeah, sure.
That's probably right. That's definitely it.
I have a thought that not necessarily affirms the mean church person position, but maybe
okay.
We're on a podcast. Let's fight.
Bring it. Yeah.
Just a side thought that I had here is like maybe this perception, not the mean church people exist.
Right.
We're all in agreement there
for sure.
However, the truth is always somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that Philip Yancey's friend could have very possibly experienced, and many of us have experienced, someone who wasn't being mean, but was being a good member of the body.
Yeah.
Because remember, as a church, like we are a body, we are be unified. We should be members all of the bride of Christ, right? And so there are going to be times where
it'll be uncomfortable.
you're doing something that I call out, and that's going to feel mean because you're not
That's not how we do church anymore. That's like
the thing.
Old Testament stuff. This is New Testament.
Right.
We
Grace.
love unconditionally.
That's right. Only grace.
Only yes.
I was talking to a guy yesterday, a customer that I was meeting with, and am I making a lot of noise?
I don't know. You're probably shaking the entire room right now.
Probably. I have a hard time sitting still. Caitlin yells at me all the time. I'm always drumming on the steering wheel, or she's like, angry looks.
Same, brother.
Does Sabrina get mad about it too?
No, Caitlin gets mad at him when he's drumming
that's
on
right.
the steering
Yeah,
wheel.
tell
Caitlin
Steven
texts
to
me.
stop.
Yeah. I know what you're doing.
Anyway, I was talking to this guy about he's small town. His wife, like immediate interaction with her, it's like she's probably like a believer, and we had some conversation like that would kind of confirm that. Conversation with him, which also strayed into like faith territory, revealed many thoughts that he had, but he's like, I know I'm not a good Christian, but I'm trying to be. And we explored all kinds of doors down
for
that
a second.
hallway.
Trying to be a better Christian is something that like 50% of people in our churches never even get to.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
That's
Like he recognizes a
crazy.
deficit, and he's like, that's important.
For sure.
But he made a comment that like really reminded me of this whole conversation where he talked about not an illicit activity, but
Hang on.
Socially
we'll talk
frowned-
more.
We'll say
talk
socially
more,
frowned upon.
Okay.
Recreation that is not looked well upon.
There you go.
That he's a part of.
More and more ominous.
And he said at this particular venue, like he said, that was my church. Like I felt more welcomed and loved there than I ever did walking into any of the churches that that I went to with my wife around here. And then continued on to talk about the church experience in small town. Like, oh, we've got 25 churches here in this little town. And, I've had the same experience at this one and that one and that one. And I've heard this guy saying this about that. And that made me think like same conversation we're having here, right? Like, but why is this thought so pervasive? Could be because every church is just rife with mean people. Could also be that the on average, like church attendance across the board in America, the average church size is like around 65, 75 people. It's small. And in a body that size, like you're going to encounter those situations where it's as long as it's a good healthy church. Hey, Cameron, I think that maybe you're not necessarily walking with the Lord in that action. And again, people don't like getting their toes stepped on.
Yeah.
So a lot of times that's gonna look like, well, forget you, man. Like I'm gonna go to the church down the road, and then now they're telling the story in a different way. Now Cameron is going and saying, I left that church because they just gossip. Right. They're just talking about everything that I do.
And they find the sympathy. I mean, we talked a little bit last week about the critical journey, and that's part of it. Like being held accountable is probably part of that wall where it's like, you have to make a decision when somebody calls you on XYZ. Okay, am I going to bristle up and get mad about that and leave to where I'm more comfortable and I can find a God of my own design? Or am I going to actually address the issue? Like that's one of the big steps that we can take in our faith. That's a really good testament of like where we are spiritually. Like when we can say, hey, you're right, I need to do better. And then we like, thank you,
Yeah, I could say a couple things with what you're saying, like kind of against this post, and a couple things for, and then I'll let you share, Cameron, because like I totally hear what you're saying, Preston. Like we've all worked, well, I don't know, I guess in sales to some degree, like at least customer facing to some
I've been
degree.
in sales.
Yeah. One thing when I first started sales, like people lie, like they just make up stuff. And it's like really clear whenever it's a transactional relationship, because they'll do anything they can to get some sort of like edge. So they'll either exaggerate something, or they'll like say that something does what it really doesn't do, that kind of thing. Like people just tend to exaggerate or make things up. And I know that's not novel, but I think we forget that when we hear stuff like this, because like the reality of the situation is we have no idea what's actually happening at this church at this point. is like maybe this was a string of like he just showed up halfway through the service. I'm not saying that is what happened, but like it's possible. It could also be like
it could also not even necessarily be dishonesty, but just the difference of perception.
Right,
Like
exactly.
we both view the same event from two different angles,
and that's what I mean. That's
yeah.
like on part of that. Like it could be like, so my mom, I know my parents listen to this podcast. Like she always gets, her face just gets misinterpreted because she just cannot hide her expressions, and so she's had to be very aware of that, being like a pastor's wife, that like people will just misread her face all the time and think it's against them. This has happened like before. So like that's one of those things where it's like maybe this person wasn't even thinking anything about it, and they just got misinterpreted. So that's possible. The second thing though, and then I'll say more like on this, is like churches are not AA meetings, and like you're going to worship with other believers. I know churches can absolutely be a place of healing for people, and absolutely should be. Different than an AA meeting, though.
Yeah.
Like you're gathering, it's supposed to be somewhat reverent, joyous, welcoming, all of those things, but it's not an AA meeting. Like you're not going there to be the center of attention, and like that's a lot of times just the way this guy described being at an AA meeting. That's what it sounds like he's expecting. That's not what the case is. So
yeah, which I could argue
should be more like, or what do you mean?
Carefully. Maybe. I mean, AA started as a Christian organization and then since has gone very secular, but that's a whole other conversation.
Right.
I could argue that some of that is symptomatic of the way that we've decided to do church and make that normal.
Fair.
Sure. Where like now
the process
it's the same
and the
thing
structure
as like so if you go to try to see like a show at the PAC or something, like a play or a musical or whatever. Like there's a point when they close the doors and there's an usher standing outside the doors.
Right.
It's like you have to wait for the next act to begin to go in or whatever, right?
Right.
Because you don't disrupt what's going on. You can be a distraction to the players. You could be a distraction to other people.
Yeah.
In that kind of like high art setting, not that church is a high art setting, but there's expectations. You should be met with disapproval when you walk in those doors. Late, right? And that's why they have those safeguards in place to make sure that you don't do that. We've decided at some point down the road that church should look more like that,
like an opera, than
it should a community gathering around the gospel of Christ. So I would argue that the same person walking into a church meeting in the first century would have had a lot more of an experience like the AA meetings today.
Yeah, certainly possible.
Than the other way. So some of it is like, well, we just do church differently, and there are expectations, good, bad, or indifferent. This is how we do things, and there is some sort of level of conforming to this social mores that is expected.
Sure. And what I'm not saying is that if this person really did give them a glance because they're late and, you know, oh, I just have a higher view of church and God than you do. Like that's
that's
obviously
a problem.
Exactly. And so like if this is to be believed, then certainly like just going back to what you're saying, usually it's in the middle, like two things can be true at once, which is like, it's not an AA meeting. So like you shouldn't expect the same things.
Right.
Also, like it's still like you're still welcoming people for being a part of it. I think the principle is still true. They still made effort to come and to go, especially somebody who's a recovering alcoholic, obviously like this person is. Like that's a different scenario than like, like certainly like giving a believer who has been going to your church for 10 years and then just has had a string like half a year of just like not showing up or showing up late, like that would probably warrant some sort of like certainly conversation. But somebody like this who clearly is probably like a new believer and like I think different scenario. So I just want to say a couple things and I'll pass it back to you, Cameron, which is like we talked about this in the last episode. Like church for the believer specifically ought to be the most unifying place. Like period. Like I talked about it in my sermon recently, where I love Thunder basketball. The playoff atmosphere in Thunder basketball is designed to be unifying. Everybody wears the same shirt. You're all cheering for the same team. You're supposed to get loud. Like the atmosphere invites unity. The church ought to do that, but in a divine way. Like the unity that we have is given by God. It's the same unity that he shares amongst himself. So like we should have that same unity. So it's like, why is your first response disapproval if someone's there? And I think we see this a lot, especially in like more like fundamentalist for sure, like type churches where it's like it has to be this, and this, and this. Right. And if it's not, then like you just don't care as much as I care. When in reality, like that is not the way you treat another believer in Christ. There are ways to handle disobedience. There are ways to handle like neglecting gathering, but it doesn't seem like that's what this person is doing. So it's like, yeah, there's just ways to handle this that I've seen this kind of thing happen. I will say though, for the most part, people are not like this. I know that's perhaps the perception a lot, at least from I may have a different one than you from what you've talked about, Cameron. But like from my perspective, if somebody showed up late or like if they show up at all, people are going to be very welcoming. Like I'm thinking of our congregation, Preston. Like not a soul in there would be, like we would be like.
Some of it like is just the beauty of a church plant, though, where like everybody is there by choice to live on mission in a certain way.
But Cameron, this is why I'm so frustrated because like non-church plants hide behind that excuse where it's like everything's new and like it's exciting and yes, absolutely true. You should still have the same attitude at your church that's been around for 50 years. Like,
I agree.
I agree. I know you are.
That, like, I don't think anybody in
you just
like,
got me fired up there.
Is like in disagreement with that. But it's like everybody who is in your congregation,
right?
A few days ago,
and I know
on Sunday,
you know this. I'm not
there expressly because they're like, we want to be a part of this mission.
100%. Yes.
40% of the people who are in my chairs every single week are there because that's the chair that their butt is molded to for the last 40 years.
Yeah.
So it's different. And no amount of like us squawking from the pulpit,
for sure,
unfortunately, is going to change their mind.
Right.
So let's have a podcast about it and change the world this way.
That's right. Yeah. This is really what God uses. To,
right. I would tack on one little like
go
sticky note to what you said there.
Tack a sticky note?
Well, if it's a sticky note, you don't have to do
They don't always stick.
That's true.
So it's a safety measure.
It's an old sticky note.
It's a very important.
It's
falling on the floor.
You got to carry it around all the time, so now you got to tack it up.
I appreciate your dirty sticky notes.
Write down all my passwords on them.
What?
The same one that you carry in your truck?
Well,
Password
I only use
101.
one password, so.
Wait, what?
I'm kidding.
But you can't remember it, so you have to carry it with you.
I'm just making the analogy work.
That was great. It was good.
I would say, I think it was you that mentioned like, maybe the reaction is because he's exhibited a pattern of walking in disruptively late. Yeah. Okay. And I would say to that end, like if that's the scenario, that's the one place that I would say like, maybe it's okay to not to be hostile or unwelcoming or whatever, but like it's maybe okay to go back to last episode,
depending
like
on
use
your
that as an opportunity to say, or not last, it was this episode, to say, hey bud, I think that you're not doing right here, because someone who is on that path of sanctification, who is supposed to be growing more in Christ likeness, is going to grow in their desire to be in the presence of God's people, to be in the presence of God, to worship God. And so continuing to exhibit. Now, look, I have 5 kids and a wife that likes to put on makeup. Like we're out the door late a lot.
That's what I was going to say, is what we're not saying is that tardiness is a measure of spiritual immaturity.
Right,
and I think that's what
necessarily.
Right. Like we have to make sure that's very clear.
Yeah. That's not what I'm saying at all. But if you're walking in kind of lackadaisically, like it's clear that you're strolling in 5, 10, 15 minutes late consistently, then that's maybe evident that there's not spiritual growth to the extent that you're growing in your desire to be there.
To gather. Yeah.
And that is something that the body should call out someone for.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think there are manners in which may or may not like be appropriate.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
like glares from across the room is not the way to handle
What's that going to do? Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Well, maybe. I don't see. And that, I don't know.
I can't wait to hear, like, go ahead.
I think I maybe disagree on some of those points. Like, and to be clear, sorry, I got a call, and like one of the big medical systems here is Mercy. And for some reason, the caller ID said Mercy, Mercy. So I just imagined like my great aunt, like, Mercy, answer the phone. Anyway.
Sorry.
Got to pick it up.
To add to that, we got Eleanor, a little potty. It's the same one that Carmen has. And she's taken to, so the first day, it like goes off, it sings a song and Rainbow Letter, and she's rainbow time, and she'll run to the toilet. And now it's like, it'll go off, she'll look at it and go, yep. Like an old lady, like ready to take her meds.
So good.
Yep.
All right.
Like that's it. Yep.
I love
so
every
good.
bit of that.
Kids are great.
No, I like, this is very strange. I am a very punctual person. I love being on time.
Don't say that to Kate Preston and I.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like in this room especially, I am very much the most punctual.
You want to throw us on a scale.
Which is like super ironic that you guys are like, show up on time to church if you mean it. I know you guys don't have that strong stance, but like I value being on time, but actually being late to church doesn't bother me. I mean, I lead a men's small group, and I have guys get here. Our small group started at 9:30. I have guys get here at 9:15. Anywhere from 9:15 to 10, guys will walk into that room.
Yeah,
and it's like, hey man, I'm glad you're here. So I think to make the issue about punctuality for me doesn't do anything for me. Like,
well,
because he's there, even though he's late. Like, because the alternative is, I mean, and depending on where he lives or whatever the situation is, if he's 15 minutes late, he probably lives 15 minutes away. So he looked at the clock and said, church is starting now, and I'm not even left my house yet. I guess I'm going to stay home. But what he's saying is, church is starting now. I guess I should go to church.
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't have a hard time looking at punctuality as like, you're late. That means you hate Hebrews 12 or 10.
10.
Yeah, you hate Hebrews 10 because you're late. Like, or not. And again, I'm a very punctual person. So like, and people like, some of our pastors here are like, just show up on time. I'm like, they're going to show up when they want to show up. And that's probably okay to an extent. Like, we do church in a weird, like, formality nowadays anyway. So
yeah, I think like to look at, I know I go to this example all the time, but like, I think there's maybe no greater example of what church should be than the end of Acts 2, where it talks about like, they gathered together and broke bread. They shared all things in common. Like, it's just a very
and there are people that are like, oh, my donkey broke down, so I'm sorry that I'm late, and like just couldn't make it. So yeah, I don't. So
they were also in closer proximity to each other.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, but the picture you get though is like a very welcoming, loving, like a community. It's a yes, it's a body, right? And so that should that goes to your point. Like, you shouldn't show up to church with this like, I'm late. Like, what's that going to feel like when I walk in? But I'm comfortable. Like, I'm comfortable around these people, so I can come in.
Yeah.
But again, that's like what I was saying earlier. Let's examine the rest of the context there, right?
It can be a sign of complacency, not necessarily.
Yeah. But everybody's like in a different spot in their spiritual journey. 100%. And we have to be careful about that.
That's what discipleship is.
Because people are going through a different thing than we are. Right. And it's like, yeah, I'm late every time, but I read my Bible every day. When was the last time you read yours? It's like, this is about you, not me.
Right.
So we just have to be really, really careful to hone in on very small things like that. But, and again, on the other hand, like, okay, was this guy expecting like the worship leader to like, oh, hang on, stop the click, everybody. Phil's friend is here. Everybody go welcome him. Like, no, and he probably would have tweeted about that. Like, oh, they made such a big deal of me being there. Like, I was just some project.
Right.
So, and
some people you can't win, but
right. And we're assuming so much into this conversation.
Of course.
That's what we do. We're on a podcast. So, because I think part of that, like, and you referenced this a little bit, and we've talked about this before, like just the narcissism conversation. Like, most people, by the way, probably aren't thinking about you in that moment. Even the people who turned around and glared were probably like, I heard the door.
Yep, 100%. It's like a reaction. It's just
that's the thing. We all have that one door that makes that one sound in the worship center that we hate. And so
everybody
you hear that
and looks when that happens.
Again?
And so it can on some levels be like and maybe not even necessarily narcissistic. Like, if you have some of that trauma or some of that insecurity, like you're going to be up in that like way more. Like, there's a guy who I've been working with who's been attending our church a little bit, he struggles with a lot of anxiety. He's a veteran, a disabled veteran. So he's got like, Lord knows what he's seen and been through. And he has agoraphobia and like all kinds of like fears and things like that, but he wants to come to church. And he was very concerned. Like, I've been kicked out of churches. I've been like told I can't come to churches. I want to make sure that I can fit in. I don't want to draw a lot of attention to myself. I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want like all of these things. I just try to encourage him. Like, hey man, like, we want you here. Like, we're about you, and, even like as much as I do, he's been a couple times now, and he's still like, I know that you guys have a standard, and I'm going to try my best to meet that standard. I'm like, we don't, and I'm sorry that like you've had enough experiences where you think that that's the case, and I hope that our church can prove to you that that's not the case. But it's that like same kind of thing. Like, he texted me the other day. He had a big chainsaw injury. I don't think he listens. So and he's like, hey, I've got like stitches all over my face. I don't want to cause a big scene. Like, am I going to be welcome? And it's like, the fact that he was like thinking about that says so much about how people experience the church. So that's like, on the other hand, like there is some legitimacy to how people experience the church
That's
that
true.
we have to be very careful of. And a lot of it's just like reading the room. Like I'm the Connect pastor at my church, which means I'm in large part like responsible for like greeters and perceptions and like, you know, what it's like when you walk into our, even what it's like when you encounter us online or in social media or whatever, but what it's like when you walk in the doors. And so we're constantly trying to like refine and fine tune that, because on the same Sunday, we'll get notes from people that is like, this church is the least welcoming, least hospitable church on the planet. And then somebody else is like, oh my gosh, I was so welcomed and so loved and whatever. And then somebody else is like, this church kind of went overboard on the welcoming and hospitality thing. It felt pretty overwhelming. And we'll get all three of those notes on the same Sunday.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what door did you came in? Well, we all came in the north door. I don't know what to do with this information.
Right.
So you just never know how like people are going to perceive things or receive things, or
it's almost like people are different.
Right. And that's, you know, so who knows what this experience actually was or whatever. I think that we're probably compelled in some way to talk about, especially in relation to last week's episode, like, okay, what about when church people do suck?
Yeah.
We've kind of been, I think, soft about that point so far with this conversation.
We
like
have.
trying to give some benefit of the doubt to churches, which I get. We should defend our churches and our people when they deserve it. But there is some legitimacy to, you know, last week I mentioned like some of the least loving people that I know have been going to church for 80 million years and they haven't missed a single Sunday. So how do we get to that point? And John Mark Comer, I promised that I'd give you a John Mark Comer quote this week. So I'm gonna give it to you. It's a long one. You've got Spurge, you've got Sproul, I've got John Mark Comer. Mine's still alive, so take that. He talks about like the lifelong journey of being transformed into people of love. And he, I'll just quote this whole thing. It says, writing about hell, C.S. Lewis claimed that all of us are on a trajectory to either life or death. And the farther we follow that trajectory, the more pronounced its effect on us becomes. He said we are either becoming immortal horrors or everlasting splendors. And then Dallas Willard argued that death just seals the trajectory of the road or way we choose in life. It's clear that some people are living in hell now while others are living in a kind of heaven on earth. And obviously like that starts to dabble a little bit with some of what we were talking about last week with, you know, the hierarchy of like closeness to God based on our behavior and all of that. And I don't think that's what any of those three people are saying. But he says, we're not all following the same path. Case in point, look at elderly people. Most people over the age of 80 are either the best or the worst people that you know. Right. And so he's not saying, he says, you know, he's not saying this in an ageist way or whatever. Most 20 somethings, most 20 to 30 somethings are like just average people. But look through all of the most elderly people that you know. Most of them, very few of them are just like,
yeah, that's a good point.
Middle of the road, middle of the bell curve. They're either super gracious, happy, patient, loving, self-giving people that you know, and they're just happy to be alive and to be here, and they're exuberant, you love them, or they're the most bitter, manipulative, and spiteful people you know, oozing emotional poison into their family lines and reveling in others' pain. Some of them are in the middle. Most of them are noticeably to one side or the other. He says that's because they've spent almost a century becoming a person, being formed through some strange invisible chemical reaction of habits, mindsets, chosen attitudes, life circumstances, suffering, successes, failures, random events. They became who they are. So why do we see that in churches, I guess would be my question. Like why, how do we get there? How do we get to where we have 80-somethings that are either super loving and welcoming to this type of person who walks in late or whatever, or the sourpuss who looks like, you know, she's sucking on a black warhead and hates life.
Yeah, I think it just is all about spiritual practices and disciplines. Because like, I think people forget like what a lifetime of doing something really does. Like, you know, there's like that famous, like, I don't know if this is true or not, but like you can break like habits in 30 days, you can break addictions in 90 days. So it's like, if that's true, imagine like 5 years of like doing something. Imagine 10, 15, 20 years of doing something. And like this may sound weird. Let me clarify. Non-habits can be habits, meaning you have a habit of not reading your Bible, or you have a habit of not praying before a certain thing. You have a habit of not doing X, Y, Z. So it's like, if you're a believer, you're going to form habits and you're going to form non-habits. And I think spiritual habits, spiritual disciplines really change that. And I completely agree with that quote. I mean, we all, I'm sure, are thinking of like certain people in our lives, like at this very moment, who meet one of those criteria. For the people in our church who are like the greatest people I know, it is obvious their devotion and their daily habits, their consistent commitment to following Jesus in the day to day. That is abundantly clear.
Yeah.
And so I think just like we forget how important, especially young people, like what habits you start now are really going to impact like your future, especially spiritual habits. Like they really are like going to change the trajectory of a lot of your decisions. So yeah, I mean, I know that's just kind of off the cuff what I was thinking about, but why this exists in church is because some people just don't form the spiritual habits they need to form. And they just go through their life coasting. They never go through that wall, like you mentioned last episode. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that you were like actually asking or more rhetorically, but that just got me thinking.
Critical Levitical is sponsored by A Frank Voice. A Frank Voice publishes devotional and discipleship content and resources geared to help you and your family grow in your relationship with Jesus. See more about the resources and books available at www.afrankvoice.com and use the promo code CRITICAL to get 10% off your next purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a reality. So for us, like, I love that advice. Like, the habits that you're forming now, like, literally can shape what you're going to look like as a octogenarian, you know?
Right.
But like, we never think about that.
Correct. That's
especially like when you're young, like you don't think about the future. You don't
Yeah.
think about what am I going to be like when I'm 70?
Yeah.
Because if we do, we just assume we'll get there when we get there.
That's right.
Right. And
I'm not gonna be like that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. We don't realize that it takes 60 years of being formed that way to be there. We're not going to just wake up one morning. That's like, I tell people all the time who are struggling with like addiction or struggling through things and whatever. It's like, you're not going to wake up one day and be fixed.
Right.
You have to start taking the steps now to get there. Because oh, well, when I get my job, I'll stop doing this. Or when I get married, I'll be this way. Or when I like whatever. Like, that's not how it works, unfortunately. Like, the decisions that you make today, which, you know, that gets like super like, live your best life now, you know, like.
Sure.
But yeah, like just thinking in a longer view. And that's another thing that Comer talks about in Practicing the Way is he's like struggling with anxiety and asks his wife, like, how much longer do you think I'm going to have to deal with this like crippling anxiety? And she said, I don't know, maybe until you're in your 60s. You know, and at the time of writing that, he was like 39 or 40 or something like that. You know, it's like, well, that sucks. Like, I don't want to have to wait 30 years to fix it. But that's the reality. Like, lives are long. It takes a lifetime.
Yeah.
Spurgeon, I'll quote him for you.
Appreciate it.
Said, we decide in half a minute what takes a lifetime of proving, speaking of salvation, which there's a whole other rabbit trail we could go in. But like, we follow Jesus. We talked about the critical journey last episode. Have I shared Lincoln asking you about, no, because we haven't actually recorded in a while. We took a little bit of a break. We were on a break. Lincoln the other day was asking me about heaven, what it would be like to be in heaven with God. And so I was thinking theological, so I started answering theologically about what like salvation means, what it's like we're going to be there, we're going to have brand new bodies, we're like no more pain, no more tears, what the Bible tells us, like we're going to be united with God in glory. He's going to be the source of light for all things. So there's not even going to be darkness, like night or anything like that. It's going to be beautiful. We're going to get to worship him together for eternity. And he's like, yeah, but how does this body get up there? I was like, oh, you're thinking like a whole different question altogether.
What's
like
it like?
Metaphysics.
Right,
and so start trying to explain this like metaphysical relationship with all that with him. He was like kind of okay with it, kind of not. Like, he's 7, so, you know. But then, you know, started sharing the gospel with him again. Like, hey, like, buddy, when you're ready to have that conversation, like, I want to be here for you. Is that something you want to know more about following Jesus now? Like, we can have that conversation. He goes, no, I don't think I'm ready because you and mom will miss me if I just like disappear and go be with Jesus, which was like super sweet and awesome. But it's like, okay, well, you also
right.
fundamentally misunderstood how this works. And I said, like when we
He's
give
probably
our
like, I
life.
guess y'all aren't Christians if you're not in heaven yet.
Right, I don't want to think about that
Yeah,
implication
right,
of this. No, but I just started explaining like, no, like when we give our hearts and lives to Jesus, we are committing to follow him for the rest of our lives. And what happens from now until the day we die is that God is teaching us to love him better and to love other people better, because when we get to heaven, we're going to do that perfectly for all of eternity.
Yeah.
So the rest of our lives is practice and learning how to do that better. So we're not whisked away into heaven immediately. We just spend the rest of our lives learning how to do what God's asked us to do so that we can do it perfectly for an eternity. And he was like, okay with that answer. He still wasn't ready to do it.
Sure.
And then my other son walked in and he's like, what are you guys talking about? So I like told with him, and same thing. I was like, yeah, is that something you want to learn more about? He's like, I'm going to wait for Lincoln. There's just this idea of like, I'm going to see if anything weird happens with him before I commit to this.
Oh man, that's amazing.
Anyway.
Every time I go back to what I said about Grayson when I first like started coming here, it's like Grayson does what Lincoln does, just slower. Like I mean, like he really does.
And with way more intensity.
Yeah, that's
And
for
with
sure.
Way more.
That's for
intensity.
sure.
But anyway, yeah, just that pic. Like, I love picturing like the Pilgrim's Progress. We've talked about that before. Like that our life is a journey of learning. Like Jesus said, the 2 greatest commandments: love God, love others. Right. Our life is a journey of learning how to do that better, so that we can do that perfectly for an eternity. But people don't want to view their life that way. It's like as soon as I
myopic, man.
as soon as I get
me.
the job I want, as soon as I get the house I want, as soon as I get the whatever, I'll take my faith seriously then.
Yeah. Well, we say that about every aspect of our lives, though. That's
Sure,
the problem.
yeah.
Where it's like, I'll figure that out when I figure this out.
Right.
Like literally that. I mean, there was like some quote. I don't know. It's probably like more of a meme than anything else. Like adulthood is just saying, it's like, well, but everything will slow down next week, and then I'll get it done or whatever for the rest of your life until you die. Like that's so. I think we kind of view Christianity the same, where it's like, well, I'll take spiritual habits more seriously next week when I'm XYZ. Yeah. So just made me think of that.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
You got anything for us, Preston?
You've been quiet for a while.
I mean, not really. I mean,
You don't
guys,
have to.
Did we fix it?
I think you fixed it.
We
I mean, I
definitely.
think that like
Nobody will. No more glares in church.
That's right. That's right.
We fixed it.
Knock it off. Is what we're saying. No, the practical.
Oh, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying the practical like takeaway. You pretty well summed it up there in that last point, but like as we commit to those disciplines, that walking in Christ likeness, it will ultimately, if the church is committed to doing that together, will ultimately reveal that picture that I mentioned of like the church body that you see in the early church in Acts. And that's the church that like, whether to call back to your example earlier, like some people are going to love the welcoming atmosphere. Some people are going to hate it. Some people are going to think you didn't do enough. Some people are going to think you did too much.
Yeah.
Whether they like it or not, it's clear when the church is a welcoming body, right? And so the encouragement there is pursue that Christ-likeness in order to be a church that it's clear that when someone walks in late, those are not glares. That's what's going on back there, right? That's a difference than, why are you here?
Right. Yeah, that's good. That's a good reminder. Cameron, you had one more thing or something?
Yeah, I could talk about it. I don't know if I'll use this or not, but sure. On the one hand, like, give the church a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. Like, I know that lots of people have done a lot of things that have made it really hard to do. But I think we're better when we assume that other people have our best interest in mind. And I understand that's a very vulnerable position to be in.
Yeah, it's hard.
But in the context of like a healthy church, I think it's, in a lot of ways, it's the only way. Like, we have to trust that we have one another's best interests in mind, or we're never going to live as vulnerably as like God wants us to. And that's hard, and people get hurt, and I get it. But understanding that like our identity is in Christ, and our well-being and our personhood and our everythingness is in Christ on this side of the cross. When we do get hurt, we understand that it's not us. It doesn't hurt us. It doesn't like degrade us as people. So I think it can maybe make it easier to be hurt, if that makes sense.
Yeah. It's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah.
I know that's kind of getting more heavy than we normally get, but
No.
like, I don't know, man. I think we're better when we just live vulnerably and honestly with one another and assume that everybody else is doing the same thing. As hard as it is, and as much trauma as we've experienced, I know that's hard.
It's good.
Yeah. And on the other side, like social enforcement can be a really good thing. Like when it comes to like, well, don't glare at people who are late. Like, well, on the other hand, maybe kind of like social enforcement is good. Like if a kid is on the playground, like eating squirrel turds or something and everybody makes fun of him.
He's not going to do that.
That's probably a good thing because you start to learn what are the normal things that I should be doing. Maybe I should do that. I don't know.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah. It's a culture.
Bring back bullying.
That's the
You heard it here.
Yeah.
That's right. Especially in church is what you're saying.
Yeah.
That's right. Bring back bullying in church. And then also Mormons are the prettiest people on the planet. That's what I learned today.
That cannot be how we close this.
I'm not. Well, maybe it will be.
I'm probably
It's up
going to
to
cut out
Cameron.
the whole last 10 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. I can end it however I want.
Hey, I appreciate y'all being here and watching this episode. Again, if you didn't hear last time, we're kind of changing the format a little bit. So slightly shorter. Weekly episodes
Allegedly.
now. Right. In theory, they will be shorter. In practice, perhaps. You'll have to watch and see. But
or just look at the little timestamp below.
That'll do it too. Yeah, but seriously, check in. Each week, every Thursday, we're going to drop a new episode, new content. So like, subscribe, share with a friend, comment.
Especially that middle part. We said we were going to do a giveaway at 95.
That's
We're
right.
at 81.
Getting closer.
think.
Oh, we
or
are.
something.
That's right.
As of the time of this recording, we're at 81.
95 subscribers on YouTube, right? 95 on
14
YouTube.
More of you click subscribe.
Giveaway.
Someone will
Seriously.
get something.
We're so close. If you're even remotely entertained, just do it. Just do it.
Are you
Even if you're not entertained, do it anyway.
Yeah, you can subscribe and then silence the bell.
That's right.
No, hit the little bell icon.
That is important, I guess, isn't it?
But we appreciate you here.
Thanks for being here.
Tune in for next week.